Take a moment now. Settle into your bed. Feel the way your body is supported. The pillow beneath your head, the quiet in the room, the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Tonight, you are here not to think too hard, not to struggle, not to solve, but to allow words, ideas, and stories to carry you softly toward rest. And as you drift into that restful state, let's begin with something simple. Imagine your day. From the very moment you opened your eyes this morning, how did it begin? Did you hear an alarm? Did the light peek through the curtains? Did you reach for your phone before anything else? Most of us do. Almost without thinking, we grab that small glowing screen. And instantly, the day fills with messages, news, endless feeds of pictures and words. It's as though the world enters our mind before we even enter ourselves. Pause there. Ask yourself why. Why do I reach for my phone first? Is it habit? Is it a need for a connection? Is it the fear of missing something important? Whatever the reason, the choice is rarely examined. It simply happens, like breathing. Then perhaps you moved to the kitchen. Maybe you brewed coffee, or tea, or poured a glass of water. You added sugar, or milk, or nothing at all. And you drank it the same way you always do, often without noticing the taste, because your mind was already moving ahead to the tasks of the day. And yet, in these tiny choices, in these overlooked moments, something important lies. The philosopher Socrates, the curious wanderer of ancient Athens, dressed in plain clothes, often standing in the marketplace with questions ready on his lips, believed that these ordinary, unexamined actions shaped our lives more than we realized. He was not rich, nor powerful, nor beautiful in appearance, yet his words have traveled thousands of years to reach us tonight. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," a bold statement. But what did he mean? He did not mean that every second must be filled with analysis, or that we must turn into philosophers debating endlessly. What he meant was something quieter, gentler, but profound. That within each choice lies a reflection of who we are becoming. And if we never pause, never ask why, never notice, then life passes by like a shadow, lived without awareness. Think about how many choices you made today. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. From what you ate, to what you wore, to the way you responded when someone spoke to you. Most of them happened automatically. They required no thought, no reflection, no examination, and that is not always a bad thing. If we had to stop and analyze every step we took, we would never get anywhere. Habit, routine, automatic behavior, these keep us moving. They save energy. They create stability. But when everything becomes habit, when everything becomes routine, then we stop seeing ourselves clearly. We stop asking whether these choices align with who we want to be. We drift into autopilot. Now imagine this. What if, just once a day, we asked to question, not to criticize ourselves, not to judge, but simply to open a small door of reflection. A door into our deeper values, our hidden motivations, our true desires. This is the gift of the Socratic method. It begins, always, with a question. A gentle question. Oh, why? Why do I drink my coffee this way? Why do I check my phone first? Why do I feel restless when I am still? And notice, Socrates never gave answers. He guided people into their own answers, often through layers of questioning, peeling back assumption after assumption, until truth revealed itself like the center of an onion. So tonight, as you rest, we will walk through this process slowly, together. We will take something as small as your morning coffee and see what it says about your values, your desires, your needs. We will notice the way autopilot controls much of our modern life, and we will gently practice turning off that autopilot, just for a moment, with the simple power of asking why. You do not need to stay fully awake for this. If your mind drifts, if your eyes grow heavy, let them. You may drift in and out of the words. That is perfectly fine, because the questions, the images, the reflections will still settle softly into your mind. Like seeds planted in fertile soil, they will wait for the morning, when you wake, to grow. So breathe deeply again. Let the breath move in and out. Feel your body soften further. Feel the space round you grow quieter. You are safe. You are resting. And tonight, philosophy is not about debate, or argument, or books in a library. It is about companionship. Socrates, in his gentle questioning, walks beside you now, helping you to see not with judgment, but with curiosity. This is the beginning of our journey. A journey into reflection, stillness, and the gentle rediscovery of choice. And now, we step into the first doorway, the hidden power of asking why. The hidden power of why. Think again about your day. You wake, you move, you choose, again and again. Each motion feels small, each decision almost invisible. Yet, if someone were to trace all those tiny moments, what time you wake, what words you speak, what thoughts you allow, what impulses you follow, they would see something remarkable. They would see a pattern, a rhythm, a hidden order. Your life, as it turns out, is a mosaic built from thousands of tiny tiles, and each tile is a decision. Most of us never see the pattern forming, because we rarely pause long enough to ask the simplest question of all. Why? The word is short. Just 3 letters, yet it holds within it the entire structure of human consciousness. When a child first learns to ask why, the world opens. A new kind of awareness begins. Every object, every rule, every behavior becomes something to understand, not just obey. Why is the sky blue? Why do people get sad? Why can't I touch the fire? The moment we stop asking why, truly asking it, is the moment we begin to live unconsciously. And in this unconscious state, we drift. We react to the world instead of choosing our place in it. We buy things not because they bring joy, but because they promise meaning. We follow trends not because they align with who we are, but because everyone else is following them. The philosopher Socrates understood this danger long before modern society. He walked barefoot through the bustling streets of Athens, where merchants shouted prices and politicians shouted promises, and he asked his fellow citizens questions that unsettled them. Why do you believe that justice is this? Why do you pursue wealth if you say you value virtue? Why do you claim to know when you have never examined? The Athenians often grew frustrated. They wanted quick answers, not more questions. Yet Socrates knew something they did not, that every unexamined belief becomes a quiet prison. Now, imagine bringing that same spirit of questioning into your own daily life. Not in a way that disturbs you, but in a way that frees you. Let's take something simple. Your morning coffee. You make it almost without thought. You add the same sugar, the same milk, the same number of sips before you check your phone. But tonight, lying here, ask yourself, why this coffee? Why this ritual? Why the same pattern every morning? Perhaps it's because it comforts you. Perhaps it gives you a sense of control. Perhaps it connects you to something you've always done, or to someone you used to share mornings with. You see, every habit hides a story. Every small behavior contains layers of memory, emotion, and meaning. When you ask why, you begin to uncover these hidden layers. It's not about judging them. It's about seeing them clearly. And seeing clearly is the beginning of wisdom. Socrates believed that ignorance was not the absence of knowledge, it was the illusion of knowledge. To believe you already know is to stop looking, to stop growing. The moment you say, "I already understand," your mind closes like a door. But the question why keeps the door open. It invites light into the room. You might ask, why do I work so much? And perhaps, under the surface, the answer is not just ambition. It might be fear. Fear of being seen as lazy. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of emptiness. You might ask, why do I avoid silence? And maybe, beneath the noise, there is loneliness. Or maybe silence reminds you of something unresolved within. Every why reveals something living inside you. Now, take a deep breath. Let that sink in. Asking why is not an interrogation. It's an act of kindness toward your own mind. It's saying, I want to understand you. I want to see what drives you, so that you can rest. Even in this moment, as you lie here, your mind may wander, perhaps to your plans for tomorrow, perhaps to something you wish you'd done differently today. If you notice that, don't fight it. Just ask softly, why am I thinking this now? What part of me is still awake, still holding on? And as you ask that, you'll notice something beautiful. The question itself begins to loosen the thought. It softens it. It brings awareness, and awareness brings peace. That is the paradox of the Socratic method. It appears to stir the mind, but in truth, it calms it. Because what truly exhausts us is not thinking. It's unexamined thinking. The endless mental loops we don't notice, the quiet tensions we carry without ever asking why they're there. So when you bring that question, why, into the dim corners of your habits, your thoughts, your reactions, it acts like a lantern. It doesn't accuse. It simply illuminates. Socrates believed that through questioning, we return to ourselves. We peel away what society has told us, what family has told us, what fear has told us, until what remains is simple, direct, and true. He compared this process to the work of a midwife. Just as a midwife helps bring new life into the world, Socrates believed questioning helps bring wisdom into consciousness. He called his approach maieutic, from the Greek word for midwifery. So tonight, let your mind be the one giving birth to clarity, gently, slowly, through the question of why. Why did I feel that emotion today? Why did I avoid that conversation? Why did I say yes when I meant no? You don't need the answers tonight. You only need to ask. Asking itself begins the transformation. And as you ask, notice how your breath moves, slow, quiet, rhythmic. Notice how your body softens with each exhale. The more awareness you bring, the lighter you feel, the more you understand. The less control you need. This is the hidden power of why. It doesn't just help you think. It helps you let go. And in letting go, you sleep. Because sleep, too, is a kind of surrender, a quiet act of trust. It's when the conscious mind steps aside and allows something deeper to take over. Just like Socratic questioning. It requires faith. Faith that you don't need to have every answer. Faith that you can rest even while questions remain. So as you drift further into stillness, remember, you are learning, not with your intellect, but with your awareness. Each question softens and not inside you. Each breath deepens your peace, and as we move forward, we'll see how this simple practice, asking why, expands beyond small choices into the great architecture of your life itself. We'll look at how the Socratic method can reshape the way you understand success, relationships, and even your sense of purpose. But before that, let yourself drift a little. Let the words fade softly, because sometimes understanding doesn't come from thinking. It comes from resting with the question. And packing your morning coffee. Picture yourself waking up. The first light of morning is barely brushing against the curtains. The air is still cool and quiet, that sacred hush before the day begins. Your hand reaches for the same mug you always use. The same motion, the same sound of the kettle. Maybe it's the faint click of the switch. The gurgle of heating water. The scent of roasted beans drifting into the air, weaving through the stillness of the room. This moment, it feels so ordinary that you rarely notice it. But right here, hidden in the steam of your morning coffee, is a window into your soul. Socrates might smile at that thought. He believed that even the smallest act, when examined, reveals the essence of who we are. Because everything we do, no matter how small, springs from the invisible architecture of our values, desires, and fears. So tonight, as you lie still, let's walk through this ritual together, step by step, as though you were examining it under the gentle light of philosophical curiosity. The ritual of waking. Why coffee? Why this ritual? Why this precise order? Wake, stretch, pour, sip, scroll. Perhaps it begins not with the drink itself, but with the desire for control. In a world that rushes and demands, this small ritual is something you command. You choose the flavor, the temperature, the pace. In that first sip, there is something deeply human, the longing for stability, for something familiar. The philosopher Aristotle might call this the pursuit of eudaimonia, the state of human flourishing, where we seek balance and harmony in our lives. Even a morning cup of coffee, he might say, can be part of that pursuit, if done with awareness, if it nourishes your well-being rather than dulls your senses. But Socrates would tilt his head and ask, do you drink this coffee because you truly love it? Or because it fills a silence you fear? A simple question, yet it opens a deep reflection. How many of our daily rituals are acts of awareness, and how many are acts of escape? The first sip. Now imagine the warmth of the cup between your palms, the faint hiss of steam, the aroma rising, alive and complex, bittersweet, earthy, grounding. That first sip touches your tongue. And for a moment, the world narrows to this single sensation. Bitterness, warmth, relief. It feels good, not just because of the taste, but because it marks the beginning of something familiar. But again, pause and ask, why does it feel so good? Maybe it's chemical, the caffeine waking the mind, sharpening the senses. Maybe it's emotional, a reminder of safety, of routine, of continuity. Or perhaps it's symbolic, your silent agreement with the day. When we trace our habits back like this, we begin to see that every simple action carries 1,000 threads: memory, comfort, identity, longing. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his private meditations, observe always that everything is the result of change, and accustom yourself to think that nothing nature loves more than to alter existing forms. Even your coffee is a symbol of change. Beans roasted by fire, water transformed by heat, liquid turned into energy. You drink transformation every morning without noticing. And yet, how often do you resist transformation in your own life? How often do you cling to routines that no longer serve you, to habits that comfort you but quietly drain your energy? The hidden habit. Your morning coffee is not just about caffeine. It's about rhythm, the way the body anchors itself in repetition. Humans crave patterns. They give us safety, a sense of self. But these patterns can also trap us. Socrates saw this in his own society. in people who followed traditions blindly, never questioning why they believed what they did. He saw that the unexamined life wasn't just shallow, it was exhausting. Because every habit you don't understand eventually begins to own you. You think you are choosing, but the pattern is choosing for you. So tonight, ask softly, what are the hidden habits that shape my mornings? Not to criticize them, but to see them clearly. Because seeing is the first act of freedom. Maybe the coffee itself is innocent, but maybe what it represents is deeper, the desire to numb the anxiety of beginning. The fear of emptiness before productivity starts. Perhaps it's not the caffeine you seek, but the permission to feel alive. Socrates might gently ask, if you could begin your day without that need, who would you be? The quiet between sips. After that first sip, there's a pause, a tiny silence. You look at the mug, the swirl of liquid cooling, the little ring it leaves on the table. This quiet moment is where awareness enters. You can rush past it, scroll through your phone, fill the silence with headlines and messages. Or you can breathe and feel that this small pause holds an entire philosophy of being. The French philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Your coffee can become your meditation, not a stimulant for movement, but a space for stillness. To hold the cup, to breathe in the scent, to feel the warmth on your skin. To notice how your thoughts drift in the stillness, and to ask, softly, why these thoughts? Why now? This is the Socratic method turned inward, not as debate, but as tenderness, not to prove anything, but to wake up gently to your own consciousness. Beyond the cup. Now, imagine you're done. The mug is empty. The day is waiting, but something feels different. You've seen the small act for what it truly is, a mirror. You understand that even something as mundane as coffee carries the essence of choice, value, and meaning, and from this awareness grows a question that touches everything else in your life. If I can be this conscious over a single cup of coffee, what would happen if I lived this way all the time? If I paused before reacting, if I questioned before judging, if I chose not from habit, but from clarity. This is how the Socratic method becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a daily practice of awakening. To see, to ask, to understand. And as you reflect on this, your breathing deepens again. Your body relaxes. You can almost feel the day dissolving. Its noise, its pace, its demands. The mind that was once restless now becomes curious, gently, quietly curious. Curiosity is the opposite of anxiety. Anxiety tightens the world into something small and heavy. Curiosity opens it wide again, and in that openness, peace arrives, naturally, without effort. So, as the night deepens, imagine yourself holding that cup once more. Not for caffeine, not for habit, but for awareness. Feel the warmth between your hands, smell the quiet aroma rising. Let it remind you that everything, when examined, reveals meaning. Even this moment, even this breath, and just as the cup cools and empties, so to do your thoughts. All that's left is stillness. The Socratic mirror, turning questions inward. The Socratic method begins with a question, not to seek quick answers, but to uncover the truth buried beneath habit and assumption. It is, at its heart, a dialogue between the self that acts and the self that observes. In the ancient Athenian marketplace, Socrates would wander among merchants and citizens, asking questions that seemed simple but carried unsettling depth. What is justice? What is courage? What is the good life? He asked not because he believed he already knew, but because he understood that truth only reveals itself to a mind humble enough to question everything, especially itself. Now imagine this scene not in a bustling marketplace, but within your own mind. The voices you hear throughout your day, the critic, the dreamer, the planner, the doubter, all stand together in a quiet agora, waiting for the philosopher within you to speak. And the first question he asks is this: why do I live the way I do? The words echo softly through the corridors of your consciousness. It's not a question to be answered quickly. It's not meant to provoke guilt or regret. It's a gentle light, illuminating corners that were long hidden in shadow. You begin to see patterns, habits, reactions, preferences, all shaped by unseen hands, upbringing, culture, fear, memory. The dialogue within. The Socratic mirror invites you to turn your gaze inward, not as an act of judgment, but as an act of understanding. Each question becomes a mirror held up to the soul. Why do I seek approval? Why do I fear failure? Why do I feel restless when nothing is wrong? Let the questions drift, like leaves on a quiet stream. No need to chase answers. The power lies in the asking, because every honest question rearranges the landscape of the mind. When you ask why, something stirs inside, an awareness that was once dormant. The Stoics, like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, inherited this from Socrates. They taught that peace comes not from controlling the world, but from understanding the self that perceives it. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But how do we reach that understanding? By questioning what we believe, what we expect, what we cling to. By holding our thoughts the way a philosopher holds an argument, not with hostility, but with curiosity. And slowly, as the dialogue unfolds, you begin to see that you are not your thoughts, nor your emotions. You are the one who observes them. You are the quiet witness behind the noise. The layers of self. Socrates often said that wisdom begins with knowing that you know nothing. In that admission lies an immense freedom. It means you no longer need to defend your image, your identity, your certainty. You can breathe again, because the burden of being right dissolves. Now the questioning deepens. Why do I need to be seen as strong? Why do I fear being alone? Why do I rush to fill silence with sound? These questions are not accusations. They are invitations. Each one opens a door to a part of yourself waiting to be heard. Perhaps the voice that fears loneliness is a younger self, the child who learned that love must be earned. Perhaps the drive to always be productive hides a quiet dread of stillness, where unhealed memories whisper. Perhaps your restlessness is not impatience at all, but the soul's yearning for meaning. When you listen without judgment, these voices soften. They no longer need to shout. You begin to see your inner world not as chaos, but as conversation, each part of you trying, in its own way, to be understood. The courage to question. To question oneself is an act of bravery, because the moment you ask, "Why am I the way I am?" you step into the unknown. You loosen your grip on the familiar story of me. Socrates called this the beginning of virtue, not obedience, but insight. He believed that a good life is one lived in alignment with truth, not social truth, not convenient truth, but the truth discovered through honest self-inquiry. And that truth is often quiet. It doesn't arrive with thunder or revelation. It seeps in gently, like light through morning fog. It's the realization that much of what we chase, validation, success, distraction, is a substitute for something deeper, connection, meaning, peace. As you breathe, feel that realization sinking in. The tension in your body loosens, the mind begins to unclench. Questioning is no longer a task. It becomes a form of peace. The very act of asking turns anxiety into curiosity. self-criticism into awareness. And when you gaze into the Socratic mirror long enough, you don't just see the face you show the world. You begin to see the infinite depth behind it. The calm observer, the quiet soul, a one who has always been watching. The gift of not knowing. At last, you reach a strange, beautiful place. Is space between knowing and not knowing. It feels like standing at the edge of a vast sea. You can't see where it ends, but you can hear the waves, steady, eternal, soothing. This is the wisdom Socrates cherished most. To admit, I do not know, is not defeat, it is liberation. Because the moment you stop pretending to know everything, you become open to everything. In that openness, truth can flow in, not as dogma, but as experience. So tonight, as you lie in quiet, let this awareness wash over you. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to fix everything. You only have to stay curious. Curiosity is the doorway to peace, and peace, as Socrates knew, begins with the simplest act, the courage to ask. The autopilot mind, escaping unconscious living. How much of your life, truly, is lived with awareness, not just the moments you remember, but the hundreds of tiny choices you make each day. What to eat, what to wear, what to check first on your phone, where to rest your gaze, what thought to believe. Most of these unfold like clockwork, smooth, automatic, familiar. We call this routine. But beneath routine, there is something more subtle at work. The autopilot mind. It moves quietly, like a river under ice. You don't notice its current until you stop and listen. The autopilot mind loves predictability. It thrives on patterns, on doing what's been done before, thinking what's been thought before, and for a while. It keeps us safe. It keeps the chaos of life organized. But it also keeps us asleep. You wake up. You reach for your phone. You scroll. You check. You compare. And before your feet touch the floor, your mind has already left the room. It's chasing thoughts, expectations, worries, like shadows it can never catch. And this, Socrates would say, is where unexamined living begins. The slumber of habit. The unexamined life. Those are his words, the ones carved through history. The unexamined life is not worth living, not because it lacks value, but because it lacks presence. It's not that life becomes meaningless, it's that we lose touch with the meaning that's already there. When you live on autopilot, life feels smaller. Days blur into one another. You chase the next thing, the next noise, the next notification, always seeking, rarely arriving. You start to confuse motion with progress, busyness with purpose, noise with truth. And yet, beneath all that motion, there's a whisper, soft, persistent. Is this really me? It's a question that surfaces in quiet moments, in the shower, at night, in a paused breath between tasks. The autopilot mind hates this question, because it interrupts its rhythm. But the soul loves it, because it remembers what awareness feels like. It remembers what living feels like. The first awakening. To awaken from the autopilot mind is not dramatic. It's delicate. It begins with noticing. Noticing the taste of water, the sound of your breath, the texture of your clothes. The thoughts that rise without your invitation. Socrates believed that awareness begins in curiosity, not judgment, not analysis, just curiosity. He taught through questioning, because questioning interrupts the trance. When you ask why, the machinery of automatic thought slows down, even for a moment, and in that pause, consciousness slips through. Try it. Why am I thinking this right now? Why did I choose this habit, this path, this reaction? Not to criticize yourself, but to see yourself, because to see clearly is to begin. To wake up, every habit you examine becomes lighter. Every automatic reaction that's seen loses some of its power. Awareness disarms repetition. Soon, you start noticing that the coffee you drink every morning doesn't just taste like coffee. It tastes like comfort, or fatigue, or routine, or longing. You start hearing your own internal monologue, the way you talk to yourself when no one's listening, and you realize that the voice that says, "I must do this, I should be better, I can't stop now," is just another habit. The gentle disruption. To live consciously is not to reject routine. It's to breathe awareness into it. The autopilot mind resists this at first. It fears slowness. It equates silence with loss. But Socratic questioning teaches that silence is where the mind begins to see its own patterns. So you let the silence stretch. You let the rhythm slow. You let the question breathe. What am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? Who is choosing this, me, or the memory of me? In that pause, a subtle thing happens. You begin to see the seer, the part of you that observes your thoughts, your movements, your life. That's the conscious self. The autopilot mind can't survive long under that gaze, because awareness is light, and habit is shadow, and where there is light, shadow dissolves. The philosophy of presence. The Socratic method was not designed just for debate. It was designed for awakening, for bringing life back into focus, one thought at a time. Each question Socrates asked was an act of remembrance, a way of calling people back to themselves. He didn't give answers. He gave attention, and in doing so, he invited others to rediscover their own capacity to think, to feel, to be. So, the next time you find yourself scrolling through endless feeds, or moving through a day that feels like déjà vu, pause. Ask softly, what am I doing right now, and why? Then take a breath. Let the question linger without trying to answer it. Feel the stillness that follows. That stillness, that space, is you. It's the moment where consciousness touches experience directly, without filters or roles. And in that moment, you are no longer living automatically, you are living awake. The wisdom of still decisions, how reflection shapes action. There's a moment, a delicate, almost invisible moment, between thought and action. It's the space before you reach for your phone, the breath before you reply to a message, the heartbeat before you speak. Most of the time, we skip that moment. We jump from impulse to action without noticing the thread that connects them. But the philosophers of old, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epictetus, lived in that space. They believed wisdom is born there, in the small pause between desire and decision. When you slow down enough to notice it, that space becomes sacred. It's the quiet chamber where intention takes shape. It's where you ask not what should I do, but why am I doing it, and in that question lies the root of wisdom. The mirror of the mind. Socrates believed that thinking itself was a kind of inner dialogue, a conversation between the soul and itself. He described wisdom not as knowledge, but as knowing that you do not know. That humility, that openness, is what transforms ordinary moments into spiritual practice. Imagine your mind as a lake. When the surface is agitated by constant activity, you can't see the reflection beneath. But when the waters grow still, the image appears clearly. You see yourself, your motives, your fears, your truth. Reflection, then, is not withdrawal from life. It's seeing life clearly enough to choose wisely. Every still decision begins there, in quiet. Awareness before motion. How reflection becomes power. When you reflect before acting, something extraordinary happens. You start to see how most of your decisions aren't truly yours. They're inherited from family, culture, habits, fears, expectations. You realize how easily the mind mistakes familiarity for wisdom. Reflection breaks that spell. It invites you to hold every choice, gently, curiously, and ask, does this come from my deepest self, or from the noise of the world? And suddenly, a new kind of clarity appears, the clarity that doesn't shout, but hums quietly beneath the surface. This is why Socrates valued questioning over certainty. Because questions open doors, certainty locks them. When you pause and ask, why am I doing this? You re-enter your own life. You reclaim authorship over your actions. You stop reacting and start responding. And in that shift, you discover something subtle but powerful. Reflection doesn't make you slower. It makes your movements more precise. The rhythm of wise living. Aristotle once wrote that virtue, excellence in living, is a matter of habit shaped by reason. But what he meant wasn't blind repetition, it was conscious rhythm. He envisioned a life where thought and action flow together like breath. Inhale reflection, exhale decision, inhale awareness, exhale purpose. When the mind and action synchronize, when reflection and motion align, the world itself begins to feel different. You notice more. You rush less. You stop confusing urgency with importance. The Socratic way isn't about overthinking. It's about moving from being driven to being directed. The more you practice still reflection, the less your decisions come from restlessness, and the more they come from inner peace. The night as a teacher. There's a reason stillness deepens at night. The world quiets, lights dim, the noise fades. You can finally hear the mind breathing. The night is a philosopher's mirror. It invites reflection without distraction, lying in bed. You can trace your day backwards, not to judge, but to understand. Socrates himself reportedly said that philosophy begins at dusk, when the world grows demand. The mind turns inward. You can try this tonight. Before sleep, breathe deeply and ask, what did I do today that was truly mine? Which moments felt aligned with my deeper self? Which didn't? Don't rush to fix anything. Just listen. Because the act of listening itself is transformation over time. Those nightly reflections become seeds. They germinate in your subconscious, sprouting into intuition, clarity, and calm confidence. You'll notice that when choices rise tomorrow, they feel lighter, more natural, because you've already met yourself in stillness. This is how philosophy becomes peace. Reflection as an act of freedom. Socrates taught that freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want. It's the power to act in harmony with reason, to choose, not because of compulsion or habit, but because of understanding. When you live reflectively, you reclaim that freedom. You are no longer dragged by impulse, by the inertia of others' expectations. You move through the world deliberately, gracefully, like a leaf drifting with, not against, the current of your true nature. And when reflection becomes a habit, you no longer need to force decisions. You simply recognize them. The right action emerges naturally from the stillness within. This is the wisdom of still decisions. They don't come from thought. They come from understanding. They don't rush. They arrive. And in this awareness, even the smallest act, making tea, closing your eyes, speaking softly, becomes an expression of philosophy. Because reflection is not an escape from life. It is life lived awake. the courage to question, facing the truth within. When Socrates walked the streets of Athens, he asked questions that made people uncomfortable. He didn't ask to embarrass or expose them. He asked because he believed that truth begins where comfort ends. It's easy to reflect on our choices when they're harmless, gentle, or ordinary. But the true power of the Socratic method lies in asking the questions we secretly avoid, the ones that whisper to us late at night, the ones that echo just before sleep. Am I living according to my deepest truth? Do my actions reflect my values or my fears? What parts of me am I afraid to meet? These questions are not easy. They demand courage. Not the courage to fight the world, but to face yourself, and that's where real transformation begins. The quiet fire of inner honesty. There's a quiet fire that burns within every honest question. It doesn't destroy, it purifies. When you dare to ask, why do I truly want this? You strip away layers of illusion, layers built by approval, comparison, and habit. You discover how many of your goals were never truly yours to begin with. Socrates believed that an unexamined life was not worth living, not because life loses meaning without reflection, but because you lose yourself in it. To live without questioning is to live as a shadow of your own potential the moment you start. Asking sincerely, something shifts the mind. Once noisy and restless, becomes a little quieter. The answers start to rise like dawn light. Through fog, you begin to feel an inner alignment, as if you're remembering something ancient and familiar. That truth isn't learned. It's recognized. It was always there, beneath the noise. The inner dialogue. Socrates said that thinking itself was a conversation with the soul, and every conversation, to be meaningful, must involve both listening and speaking. When you question yourself, don't do it as an interrogator. Do it as a friend. The point isn't to accuse, but to understand. Ask softly, patiently, what am I trying to protect? What am I afraid to lose? What would happen if I simply told myself the truth, and then pause, let the silence answer. That silence is where the soul speaks. Sometimes the answers come as a feeling rather than a thought, a tightening in the chest, a soft ache, a flicker of recognition. Listen to them all. They are the language of your deeper knowing. The Socratic method is not a debate. It's a gentle unveiling. It's removing the unnecessary, layer by layer, until only truth remains. The fear of seeing clearly. Why do we avoid self-questioning? Because we fear what we might find. We fear the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be. We fear realizing how often our choices were shaped by approval rather than authenticity. We fear the weight of honesty, but that fear is also a doorway. In every honest reflection. Fear is the threshold you must cross to reach freedom. When you sit quietly and face a difficult truth about your motives, your attachments, your hidden pain, notice what happens. At first, resistance rises like a wave. You want to look away. But if you breathe through it, something miraculous happens. The wave pauses, and underneath, there's calm, because the truth, once seen, no longer has power over you. It becomes simply part of the landscape of your being, known, accepted, integrated. The peace beyond pretending. There's a deep peace that comes from no longer pretending, not pretending to be happier, stronger, or more certain than you are, not pretending to have it all figured out. That peace is the birthplace of wisdom. Socrates never claimed to have answers. He only claimed to know that he didn't know. That humility was his strength. Because when you stop clinging to certainty, you Become open to reality as it is, fresh, fluid, alive. The Socratic method isn't about demolishing what you believe. It's about softening the walls that separate you from truth. It asks you to sit with the unknown, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. You can practice this even now, as you lie in bed. Ask yourself one question. What truth am I avoiding right now? Don't force an answer. Let the question rest in your heart. Breathe with it. Over time, the answer will emerge, gently, without drama, like dawn breaking over still water. Facing yourself with compassion. Real self-inquiry isn't harsh. It's tender. Socrates used irony and dialogue to draw truth out of others, but always with curiosity, not cruelty. When you face your own shadows, do it with the same gentleness. If you meet a part of yourself that's insecure, lost, or afraid, don't push it away. Invite it to sit beside you. Listen to what it has to say. Every fear hides a longing. Every resistance hides a truth waiting to be acknowledged. And in that compassionate awareness, your fragmented self begins to heal. Because the goal of questioning isn't judgment, it's wholeness. It's to see yourself so clearly that you no longer need to hide. When you reach that point, something beautiful happens. You become transparent to yourself, and in that transparency, there's peace. Living the question, integrating philosophy into everyday life. What does it mean to live philosophically? Not to read about it, not to quote it, but to embody it quietly, humbly, through the choices you make every single day. The Socratic method begins as a conversation, but it ends as a way of life. It teaches you that wisdom is not stored in books or degrees. It lives in the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you pause before reacting. It lives in awareness, the philosophy of the ordinary. Think about how you move through your day, the small routines, brushing your teeth, sending an email, waiting in line, scrolling through your phone. Most of life happens in these unnoticed spaces. But these are also the perfect places to practice self-inquiry. When you catch yourself reacting, when irritation rises, or impatience, or pride, that is your cue. You pause, you breathe, and softly, you ask, why am I feeling this way? What story am I telling myself right now? That simple question pulls you back into awareness. It turns an unconscious reaction into a conscious response, and in that moment, philosophy becomes alive, not as a grand idea, but as an act of gentle noticing. The philosopher is not someone who escapes life to think. It's someone who thinks while living. Every act, every word, every decision becomes a thread in the tapestry of your understanding. The power of the pause. The most powerful tool Socrates ever used wasn't logic, it was silence. He knew that silence gives space for truth to emerge. In your own life, the pause can become sacred. Before you reply, pause. Before you assume, pause. Before you decide, pause. The pause is not hesitation, it's intelligence. It's the breath where clarity takes form. When you practice this, your days begin to feel slower, not in a dull way, but in a spacious way. Like time itself starts to stretch, and you can finally feel life instead of rushing through it. That is the essence of living the question. You're no longer hunting for answers. You're learning to rest in awareness itself. Living with questions, not answers. In a world obsessed with quick answers, Socrates offered a radical alternative: to love the question itself. Most of us treat uncertainty as a problem. We crave closure, clarity, and the relief of knowing. But when you live the question, you realize that the unknown is not your enemy. It's the soil where truth grows. When you hold a question gently, who am I? Why am I here? What matters most? You allow your life, not your logic, to answer. Sometimes the answer doesn't arrive as a sentence, but as a change in how you move through the world. A subtle shift in tone, a quiet act of kindness, a small letting go. The Socratic life isn't about knowing more. It's about being more open each day. A new chance to ask, each breath, a new chance to begin again. And slowly, question by question, your life becomes its own philosophy, not written in words, but lived in awareness. The philosophy of relationships. To live Socratically also means to question how you relate to others. How often do we listen just to reply? How often do we defend instead of understand? Socrates believed that real conversation was an act of love, a shared journey toward truth. Not a battle of egos, but a meeting of souls. You can practice this too. Next time someone speaks to you truly, listen, not to agree or disagree, but to see. Notice what rises in you as they speak. The judgments, the impatience, the urge to correct, and instead of acting on it, breathe. Ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? That question softens the edges. You start to see the other person not as a threat, but as a mirror, reflecting your own inner world. When you live this way, conversations stop being competitions and start becoming connections, and every dialogue becomes a chance to understand not only others, but yourself. Finding stillness in a moving world. Socrates lived in a noisy city, full of merchants, soldiers, debates, and distractions, yet his wisdom came from stillness, not from running away from life, but from being fully present within it. You can cultivate that same stillness anywhere, in the sound of rain, the hum of traffic, or even the rhythm of your own breath. When your mind races, return to the question, what is this moment asking of me? Sometimes the answer is nothing, just to be here, to breathe. Stillness isn't about silence outside. It's about quiet inside. It's the peace that rises when you stop running after thoughts and start observing them. When you live in this awareness, even the ordinary becomes sacred. Making coffee, washing dishes, walking to work. Each act becomes a meditation, a question in motion. The circle of reflection. Every evening, as the world slows down and the lights dim, take a few moments to review your day. Not to judge yourself, but to witness. Ask quietly, what did I learn about myself today? When did I act from truth? And when from fear? This nightly reflection is your dialogue with the soul, your own gentle version of the Socratic conversation. If you practice this consistently, your awareness deepens. Your decisions begin to align naturally with your inner compass, and soon, you no longer need to search for a purpose. Your life itself becomes the answer. The Socratic path to peace, from questioning to stillness. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a slow breath in, and a long and read breath out. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts begin to soften, like waves settling on a quiet shore. You spend this time journeying through questions, examining the small, ordinary choices that make up your day. Now, we turn inward, toward the stillness that has been waiting beneath all those thoughts, because beyond the questioning, beyond the analysis, there is something deeper, a silence that doesn't demand answers, a presence that simply is. This is where Socrates was always guiding us, not to a collection of truths, but to a way of being with truth. He questioned the world, yes, but more than that, he listened. He knew that wisdom is born not from speaking, but from silence, and so tonight, you can follow the same path, the path of the questioning mind that finally learns to rest in wonder. The mind's gentle surrender. When you lie in bed at night, the mind loves to chatter. It replays conversations, worries about tomorrow, revisits the past. But what if, instead of fighting it, you simply began to question it, softly, when the thought arises, "Did I do enough today?" Ask gently, "Enough for whom? Who is the I that is measuring this?" You'll notice something subtle. The thought starts to lose its grip. It fades, like mist in morning light. This is the Socratic method in its quietest form, not in debate, but in inner dialogue. You are no longer trapped inside your thoughts. You're speaking with them. Each question becomes a small act of release, a way of loosening the knots that worry has tied through your mind, and slowly, as each thought dissolves, you return, not to noise, but to stillness. The river of awareness. Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating down a gentle river. Each one drifts by. Memories, plans, regrets, all part of the current of your mind. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to stop them. You only need to watch. This is the awareness Socrates hinted at. The understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer, the quiet witness behind them. And when you rest in that awareness, even your questions become calm, no longer sharp, demanding answers, but soft. Like ripples forming in water, the questioning transforms into curiosity. And curiosity becomes peace. The presence beyond thought. Take another slow breath in. Feel your chest rise and exhale. Letting go just a little more. There is a point between thoughts, a quiet gap where no words exist. If you listen closely, you'll find it. It's the same silence that lives beneath all questions. It's the space Socrates himself inhabited. When he paused between dialogues, listening, reflecting, letting truth reveal itself. When you rest in that stillness, you realize you don't need to find peace. You are peace. It has always been there, waiting beneath the noise of your mind. Beneath the stories you tell yourself. That peace doesn't need answers. It doesn't need improvement. It only needs your awareness. From self-analysis to self-compassion. The Socratic method teaches us to question, yes, but if all we do is analyze, we risk turning philosophy into self-criticism. True questioning is compassionate. It's not interrogation. It's curiosity. So when you notice your mistakes, your flaws, your regrets, don't rush to judge. Ask softly, what was I seeking in that moment? Was it love, safety, understanding? Behind every action, even the misguided ones, there's a longing to be whole. When you see that, you start to forgive yourself, not because you deserve forgiveness as a reward, but because understanding itself is forgiveness. This is the wisdom that quiet reflection brings. The wisdom of self-kindness. Socrates questioned everything, but his questions were rooted in care, in the desire for truth, not punishment. And when you bring that same care to yourself, you begin to live philosophy not as an idea, but as a gentle way of being. Stillness as understanding. Let's return again to the breath. Slow. UNFORCED. As you breathe, notice each exhale carries away something unneeded. A thought, a tension, a fragment of noise. You don't have to understand everything tonight. You don't have to solve the puzzle of your life. The Socratic path was never about final answers. It was about learning how to live peacefully with the questions. When you can sit quietly, with both clarity and mystery coexisting, that is understanding. You become the space that holds both light and shadow, certainty and wonder, knowing and not knowing. That is what Socrates meant by wisdom, not knowledge that fills the mind, but presence that fills the heart. The night is a philosopher. As the night deepens, the city quiets, the room darkens, your breath slows. This is the hour of the philosopher, the moment when the outer world fades and the inner one begins to speak. If Socrates were here, he would not tell you what to believe. He would only smile and ask you one simple question. What does peace feel like to you? And you, lying here, half between wakefulness and sleep, would feel the answer, not in your mind, but in your body, in the warmth of the sheets, in the rhythm of your breath, in the quiet realization that you are, at this moment, complete. No answers left to chase, no debates left to win, just presence, just peace, and in that peace, you become your own philosopher, your own Socrates. The echo of the inner voice. Somewhere in the quiet space between your thoughts, there is a voice that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't shout. It whispers softly, as if it's been waiting for you to stop long enough to hear it. This is the voice of your inner Socrates, the part of you that gently asks, is this truly what I want? Does this choice honor my peace? You've carried this voice your whole life, but in the noise of modern living, with its notifications, decisions, and endless comparisons, it becomes faint, buried beneath the static. The Socratic method was never meant for debate alone. It was designed to help you rediscover this quiet voice, the part of you that knows without words, that feels truth before it is spoken. Tonight, as you breathe, you are reconnecting with that voice. Let it speak softly to you, without judgment, without haste. It doesn't speak in arguments or analysis, only in calm awareness. You can feel it now, not as sound, but as stillness that is wisdom, not taught, not learned, but remembered. The garden of reflection. Imagine a vast, serene garden under moonlight. The air is cool. The scent of jasmine drifts across the breeze. Each tree in this garden represents a thought you've examined tonight. A moment of clarity, a truth you've uncovered. A question that no longer frightens you. You walk slowly through this garden of reflection. The grass is soft beneath your feet, and with each step, you feel the tension of the day dissolve. Some trees are tall and old. These are your long-held beliefs. Others are small, new saplings, fresh insights, just beginning to grow. You pause by one tree. Perhaps it represents your daily choices, the way you move through your routine, the way you speak to others, the way you treat yourself. You notice that it is strong, but perhaps it needs care. A little more sunlight of awareness, a little less shadow of self-doubt. And in this garden, you understand. Each question you ask is like watering these trees. Each act of self-reflection helps something in you flourish. You don't need to rush growth. You only need to tend to it with awareness. This is the slow beauty of philosophy. Not an escape from life, but a cultivation of inner peace. The freedom of not knowing. For centuries, philosophers have wrestled with the unknown. Socrates, when faced with his own mortality, simply said, "I know that I know nothing." Too many. That sounded like defeat. But in truth, it was liberation. When you no longer need to know everything, you begin to see everything more clearly. You stop trying to control life and start allowing it to unfold. In your own way, you can practice this same freedom. When a worry appears, instead of solving it, you can whisper to yourself, "I don't need to know right now." And suddenly, your mind loosens its grip. Your heart softens. The tension begins to melt away. There is peace in not knowing. Peace in trusting that the universe doesn't need to be managed, only witnessed. This was the heart of the Socratic method. To ask, to explore, and then to rest in the space beyond answers. So let the not knowing cradle you tonight, like a vast sky holding 1,000 quiet stars. The silent teacher. As the night deepens, notice how silence itself becomes your teacher. There is something profound about quiet, something that words can never touch. It shows you what you've always known. That peace doesn't arrive when you find the right answers, but when you stop searching long enough to listen. Socrates called it inner harmony. The Buddhists call it emptiness, the mystics call it presence. Different names, same truth. When the mind grows still, wisdom flows naturally, like water returning to its source. You don't have to think your way to peace, you only have to allow it. And in this moment, as the body relaxes, as the breath slows, that allowance is happening effortlessly. You are no longer the seeker. You are the space where seeking ends. The silence that remains is not empty. It's full of presence, full of being, full of you. Nightfall and the soul's gentle awakening. The night has deepened. The room feels softer now, quieter, heavier with calm. You can almost hear the hum of your own heartbeat, steady, slow, ancient in its rhythm outside. The world has exhaled. The trees no longer move. The air is still. And it feels as though time itself has folded in on this single, sacred moment. Here, there is no rush, no future, no past, only this gentle awareness of being. You are not required to solve or understand anything now. You've asked your questions. You've met your mind with kindness. And you've seen how even the smallest choices carry the weight of meaning. This is the awakening. That happens at night, when the outer world sleeps and the inner one begins to glow softly. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. But here, under the dim light of your own consciousness, you begin to see what he truly meant. To examine life is not to dissect it, but to be with it, fully, gently, without fear. Every breath now becomes a kind of question, and every exhale a quiet answer. You are living philosophy simply. By being aware of this moment, you are practicing wisdom simply by noticing your breath. Let your mind drift now, like a leaf carried by a slow-moving river. No resistance, no destination, just flow. The river of thought may carry you to distant places, a memory, a sound, a forgotten dream. Let them come, let them pass. Each is part of the larger current of who you are. As you drift, remember that sleep itself is not the opposite of awareness. It's its continuation in a different form. It's the soul's way of exploring without words. So as your eyes grow heavy, as your body melts into the bed beneath you, you can rest knowing that your mind is not falling into darkness. It is falling into wisdom, the kind that speaks in silence. Tonight, you are both student and teacher. Your dreams are your philosophers now, whispering their truths in the quiet language of symbols, and when morning comes, you will awaken later. Not because life has changed, but because you have. The echo of stillness. And now, as the final moments of this reflection unfold, you find yourself suspended in a kind of sacred silence. Is silence not empty, but full of all the questions you've asked, and all the quiet answers that have come not through words, but through feeling. You began this journey by asking what the Socratic method could teach you about your daily decisions, but perhaps what you've discovered is something even deeper. That philosophy isn't an abstract discipline confined to books or debates. It is the texture of consciousness itself. It is the way you breathe, the way you choose, the way you pause before you speak. Every philosopher, from Socrates to Aristotle to Epictetus, sought not just truth, but peace, not the peace of ignorance, but the peace that comes when understanding meets acceptance. And that peace now lives within you. The Socratic why, that persistent, humble question, has guided you through this quiet landscape of your own mind. It has helped you peel back the layers of habit and noise, revealing the tender core of awareness that always waits beneath. This is what the ancients called logos, the living intelligence that animates the world. You have felt it tonight, in your thoughts, in your breath, in the small still space between each heartbeat, and perhaps now, as the gentle hum of sleep approaches, you begin to realize something profound, that you are not separate from the wisdom you seek. You are the wisdom, you are the question, and you are the answer. You are the silence that holds. Both let this understanding sink deep, like roots settling into the dark earth. Let your thoughts dissolve into quiet surrender. There is nothing left to prove, nothing to fix, nothing to chase. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." But perhaps tonight, you've come to see that this nothing is not emptiness, it's openness. It's the infinite space within, you that allows new understanding to bloom with every breath. So now, as you drift toward rest, let your awareness soften like candlelight. The world will wait for you. The questions will still be there in the morning. But tonight, you can let go. You can rest in the knowing that your mind has done something sacred. It has learned to listen. It has learned to pause. It has learned to ask, not for the sake of certainty, but for the sake of truth. And in that asking, in that stillness, you have met yourself. Breathe one last conscious breath. Feel the rhythm of your own existence. Let your body sink completely, weightless, effortless. The questions fade. The silence hums softly. And in that silence, you are home. Good night. Philosopher, sleep well, and may your dreams continue the dialogue where words leave off.